all-new book shines a light on the power of resiliency to heal from trauma and violence. The book is called Phoenix Zones, Where Strength is Born and Resilience Lives. In it, Dr. Hope Ferdowsian shares her own experiences working with humans and animals and demonstrates how to recover and thrive. Please welcome Dr. Hope Ferdowsian. It's great to meet you. This book is intense, and I want to talk about it, but I want to talk about you first. How did you first go into medicine, or what inspired you to go into medicine?
Well, I grew up on a small farm in Oklahoma, and my parents were human rights activists, and I learned about human rights abuses all over the world from a really young age. At the same time, I was thinking about the animals who I grew up with and loved, and that really inspired me to want to be a doctor for people from a very young age, about age of 9. And I have had the opportunity since then to work all around the globe on human rights issues. And over time, I've had the opportunity to bring animals back into the equation. And I've worked with some really great organizations for people and for animals. And I've come to realize that much of the work that is left to be done lies at the nexus of where our treatment of people and our treatment of animals intersects.
And that is what is so interesting about this book. I've read a ton of self-help books about hope and resilience, but never one that tried to draw those two worlds in an intersection that was really meaningful. What made you see that, and what do you want us to take from, you know, what are sometimes difficult stories to read?
Yeah. So, like a lot of people, I've spent a lot of time thinking about how to reduce vulnerability to suffering. And I found an answer in a somewhat surprising place among survivors of violence. As I was thinking about torture survivors, sexual violence survivors, and other patients I had come to know and care for throughout the years, I realized I was recognizing this phenomenon time and again of survivors rising from the ashes, much like a mythical phoenix would, and not only healing but also thriving. And in some medical circles, this is referred to as the phoenix effect. And I realized in my work with animals, I was seeing something similar. And when I went to look for where the phoenix effect was possible, I found what I call Phoenix Zones, the title of the book.
Tell us about an animal who exemplifies this, in case we're having trouble imagining that.
Sure, sure. So one animal who I've met is named Negra, and she's a chimpanzee. She's at Chimpanzee Sanctuary Northwest here in Washington State, one of the Phoenix Zones I talk about in the book. And Negra was used in laboratory experiments in the entertainment industry for years, decades. And she's about as old as I am. And her babies were taken away from her. And you know, she was kept in a very small cage, isolated from other chimpanzees for years.
So basically tortured.
Yes, much that experience.
I mean, if we break it down,
yeah.
And you insist in the book that we stop using the euphemistic phrases that industries use and examine what's actually happening.
Right, right. That experience
which I think is super
for her,
important, obviously.
I do too. And that experience for her would have been torture, would have been like torture. And so now she lives in a wonderful sanctuary in Cle Elum here in Washington State. And
go Cle Elum.
She is thriving. You know, she has the freedom and sovereignty and love and opportunity to thrive in her own body and her own mind now, and it's
Which
just
is
really
awesome.
Spectacular.
I mean, it's awesome, and we see this, you know, as you point out, in animals. We certainly see this in people, and the question's always, why do some people find themselves crushed by the same circumstances that others are able to cope with? What have you been able to tease out of there about what resilience is made of?
Yeah, so when I looked at these Phoenix Zones, what I found is that they were all bound by key principles: a respect for freedom, sovereignty, compassion, justice, opportunity, and the belief that each individual has intrinsic worth, dignity. And ultimately, that's what survivors who are able to thrive have access to, whether they're people or animals. And you know, the other thing I came to realize in writing the book is that the Phoenix effect and Phoenix Zones could also be a metaphor for how we as a society in challenging times can move beyond a history of violence and indifference to violence that allows so much of that violence to continue.
and to figure out how to go forward. You write specifically about sovereignty over your body and sovereignty over your mind, and that seems to me like a basic human right, and you argue a basic animal right. So I highly recommend this book. It'll make you think. It doesn't matter if you agree 100% or not, but it is a very interesting thing to kind of go through the intellectual and the moral exercise. Thank you very much. You can join Dr. Ferdowsian for a special book discussion and signing tonight at Elliott Bay Book Company. She'll be joined by Diana Goodrich and J.B. McCauley, co-directors of Chimpanzee Sanctuary Northwest. We've linked more information online for you. Still ahead, creative ideas to take your picnic to the next level, a real adventure right after this. Bye.